This is an RNZ podcast.
Right now, it is that time of the week, Midweek Mediawatch o'clock. And that means, of course, the presence and the beautiful voice of Mr. Midweek Mediawatch himself, Colin Peacock. Kia ora, Colin.
What a build-up. Kia ora, Emil.
How you doing?
Good. A beautiful voice?
Yeah.
You sure? Hey, was it Jamie Wall on your own show on a Monday night who said the New Zealand accent was, I think his words were, a cacophony of claptrap?
Is that what he said?
Yep. So that's the accent as well as the content. He was saying he'd just come back from the States with the All Blacks and saying he pitied Americans trying to tune in to what New Zealanders were saying. I wondered whether that was more a comment on, sports journalists who are familiar with each other yabbering away about stuff.
What an outrageously unpatriotic thing to say from Jamie Wall.
I'm fine with it. I've been to my sister lives in France. One of my most vivid accent-related experiences was turning up on day one in France, and talking to my sister, haven't seen her in ages, and one of her friends was in the corner of the room, and he was doing this to her friends, who were going, wow, 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 wow. And I asked my sister, what is he doing and why is he laughing at me? And she said, he's just telling them that's what we sound like to him when we're talking, because, of course, they're French, they're different, they're up and down, and they're more sing-song. And when two New Zealanders start together, they go, hey, you haven't seen you in a while, getting married, are you? And it was a bit like that, and that's what it sounded like to them.
I like the New Zealand accent, Colin.
Oh, I'm okay with it, too. Life's too short to
I think it sounds great.
be uptight about that sort of thing.
Indeed, life's too short. All right, let's talk a bit about media. Lots to talk about this week, and perhaps we should start with an excellent get for TVNZ's excellent program Q&A on Sunday. Andrew Costa.
Yes, indeed. It filled the entire Q&A hour, which is a commercial hour, so probably about 45 minutes worth, which is kind of extraordinary. Can't think of the last interview that ran to that length on television. Must have been one, but quite something. And also a good one for Jack Tame. Back in mid-November, he made this very point on News Talk ZB.
I think it's really, really important that we actually understand from his perspective exactly what's gone down. So I hope that if a deal is reached, it doesn't include some all-encompassing gag order that means he doesn't ever make public comments about it. I think the public deserve to hear from him.
Well, this public certainly heard from him now on Q&A, and the main news line was that he says he briefed the ministers about Jevon McSkimming, and they pretty much say, no, you didn't.
That's right. That is definitely a story, and indeed that's the line they cut for their promos, having a sort of awkward pause as Andrew Costa had his mouth open and couldn't quite bring himself to say,
real
but
cliffhanger.
eventually did. Yeah, that yes, indeed, he says he told those ministers. As we know, he's saying it was done in this informal way. Particularly with Chris Hipkins in the back of a car. But what Jack Tame didn't ask, I thought he might have, was, in all that time that he had, was, that Andrew Costa clearly thought it was a matter of personal judgment for him whether he briefed the ministers or not and in which way he did it, and to chosen to have done it in a really record-free way. He didn't really sort of press the point, but otherwise there was a lot in that interview, and others have been able to take it on. Because, as has been pointed out by others, I think, that the senior police officers are ones who are supposed to oversee accounts of things such that they'll stand up in court, right? So choosing to say things in ways that might not be able to be fully recalled or, recalled in this ways that don't match up as they are now by the former commissioner and the ministers he says he briefed, definitely not ideal. So really good follow-ups on that, on the sort of timelines of who knew what and when. Sam Sherwood did one for RNZ, Stuff's Paula Penfold, went back to the IPCA report and found, perhaps inconsistencies with the timing there. Questions for Mark Mitchell, the current police minister, who said he wasn't told about it until very late when Andrew Costa was on his way out as commissioner. Stuff's Tova O'Brien yesterday, an article saying, in her words, the police minister was throwing officials under the bus, now blaming the Public Service Commission for being silent and not referring on to him what he might have needed to know in more time. So, yeah, really good stuff in the end, that details that could have gone away, have been now pulled out and had a microscope put on them.
Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating interview to watch and to listen to. And I suppose, all of this follow-up coverage that you talk about is also kind of heartening in that The story kind of could have faded away after that IPCA report.
Yeah.
Bombshell that it was, but it got a lot of attention. I noticed quite a few people seem to have a sense of fatigue about it, but clearly there was more to the story, and the digging is being done.
Indeed, and I think when people see the I in IPCA stands for independent, they might have thought, well, okay, that's that then, and people have to stand by their accounts. But because of the further probing and indeed putting Andrew Costa on the spot after he resigned that other public service role that he took on after being police commissioner, that makes it really interesting. So other police officers have broken their silence, as it's often been put in the reports, and it's also shining a light on that thing of where people had discretion and where there's too much discretion exercised, not enough procedure. So that possibly would have been out of the terms of the IPCA report, or it wouldn't have been. It might have been there, but you'd have to read through all of it and then pull out those parts that point to that, but actually make it clear. So some things aren't obvious until someone says them in a form of a pyramid of facts news report, where journalists who can see where the problem is ask the right questions, and then if they do or don't get answers, that in itself tells a story. So yeah, good stuff.
Sticking with Q&A, which also made a pretty big deal of an interview they did not get last Sunday.
They did. Right at the start of the program, they made that very clear.
This is the final Q&A episode of 2025. We had been hoping to bring you a feature interview in studio with Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, but that won't be happening this year. Now, to be clear, back in March, he did a shorter interview focused on trade with the One News political editor during his trip to India, and we were assured at the time he would join us for a normal, broad-ranging Q&A interview. Those assurances have continued all year. We check in with the PM's team regularly, but despite a standing invitation, they told us last week that actually the Prime Minister would not be fronting here this year.
Pretty comprehensive empty chair. There was actually more in that rundown. He had to go at other ministers who hadn't come on.
Yeah.
Tama Potaka, for example, Louise Upston, I think, both hadn't come on. It just occurred to me now, actually, Andrew Costa was probably hoping that he would too. That would have cut his interview down by half, because it being the last show of the year, they would definitely have got that in. So interesting, and in fact, on the Whip with Wallace Chapman earlier tonight, they talked about this. So Annabelle Lee Mather.
I thought what Annabelle said was really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, particularly saying, look, they should do long-form interviews, and these shows are credible, and the Prime Minister for all New Zealand, and doesn't do to be picking media outlets, doing some, not others, which is a point. David Farrar said, well, the Prime Minister should, as a point of principle, I thought it was interesting, do one sit-down, he called it a stand-down interview, but I'm pretty sure he meant a sit-down interview with every major media outlet. You can quibble about what those might be, he said, but, the ones that, we basically know who those are. And Wayne Mapp, former minister, said, probably not a lot in it for the Prime Minister to be doing this now. And also a point David Farrar made, a whole lot of questions about the leadership he'd probably face now. And Wayne Mapp was interesting just in terms of the opportunity for the Prime Minister and the National Party. He was saying, he'll be better off, and I'm sure he'll do it next year, at the start of the year. And I was thinking, when they do those sort of State of the Nation things, maybe then we'll see that he's with a bit of, maybe a bit more better economic news as well. Maybe we will see the Prime Minister come on. But one thought I did have, it is difficult for Prime Ministers, where I do feel for them, is they can be asked about anything. If you're Tama Potaka or Louise Upston, you pretty much know what areas you're going to be quizzed about. But with the PM, could be anything. And,
but that's why you're Prime Minister, right? Isn't it?
Well,
that's why you get the big bucks.
C-suite skills and all of that. Yeah, absolutely, that's true. And the spin-off did a very funny, I think it was Tara Ward that wrote it, very funny kind of run through of all the other things Christopher Luxon did do this week, had time for, including, visiting IKEA and all of that, when he was not able to do the Q&A interview. Yeah, so also worth pointing out. It's another bit of good journalism there.
What do you make of the practice of empty chairing politicians who refuse to turn up? I mean, I feel like, the entertainment value is quite sort of funny, but I think Q&A had to do the same thing last year, right?
Yeah, it risks looking a bit precious, as if you're entitled to have the Prime Minister, but where it's very reasonable they come on, and in this case they were given assurances that they would, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's the core of it. And last year it went to the wire, and eventually it happened. but this time no. So I think that's why they feel aggrieved. And others, who just said no, like Winston Peters, who had a couple of spectacular run-ins last year on Q&A that were quite colourful. David Seymour, I think, goes on all the time. He very rarely turns down interview opportunities. That's just his strategy. So if they were clear about it, we could move on. I think it was the fact that they said we will make time for this and then back down on that, whilst clearly taking other opportunities and swapping presents with Mike Hosking, as they do characteristically. It's not just him at the end of the year. So had time for that stuff, not for Q&A. I can see why they're a bit annoyed. But the more detail you can give about why you're empty chairing someone, I think the better. Although, it can run to looking a bit prissy and as if you're entitled to their time and it's not at their discretion to come on or not. I suppose that's the
calculus. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that David Seymour seldom turns down an interview request, and I think that's true. But
not a Morning Report.
Well, is it Morning Report, right? That David Seymour has said that he won't appear on for some time now.
Yeah, he said he was rudely handled. It's surely something that could be fixed up, and it is weird if you're a deputy prime minister and not going on a program like Morning Report. He does have a slot now on First Up.
Right.
Every week, so there's some communication there, and I think he's been on Checkpoint plenty of times. He speaks to the gallery.
Yeah.
Of course, he's got his own YouTube channel.
Yes, indeed.
It's there for everyone. Even Morning Report could run that if they wanted to.
It's in full capitals.
Yep,
I don't know about that. There might be a bit of copyright.
Yeah, that's not a serious. I'm gonna have to. I think I'll turn left outside the studio and run back downstairs when I'm done with this.
All right. Speaking of prime ministers on screen, others have been on screen as well. Jacinda Ardern, for example, on Graham Norton's show.
Yeah, that's right. Wonder how Christopher Luxon would go on that. She doesn't speak to the New Zealand media much these days, or indeed royal commissions into COVID. So it does make you wonder what she would say and what the media would make of it. It's not actually screening till next week, I think, or maybe even tomorrow. I think it's the 11th. That's tomorrow, isn't it? I think it's on from tomorrow on TVNZ on demand, I believe. But yeah, so what news would arise from this rare interview? Well, TVNZ went with Jacinda Ardern tells Graham Norton why she wanted to punch Simon Bridges, and that's because that's an exchange that's in the Prime Minister movie. RNZ, Jacinda Ardern opens up about pregnancy and politics on the Graham Norton show. That's a bit of a yawn. Stuff went with Graham Norton asks Jacinda Ardern what went wrong with her popularity in New Zealand. She gave a fairly bland answer to that in the end. Not all that newsworthy. BBC went with Jacinda Ardern once auditioned to be a hobbit.
Giving the people what they want, eh?
Yeah, well, it was certainly what Kate Winslet, who was also a guest on the show, wanted. It really tickled her.
Did you actually?
I did audition.
Brilliant!
I did half of New Zealand audition, just to be, and half of New Zealand starred, except for me. I did.
What was it? Too tall? What was the problem?
That's what I told myself. I auditioned to be an extra as a hobbit. Because I grew up quite close to Hobbiton, where they did all the filming.
It's not a real place.
It is.
New Zealanders believe it exists.
I also believe it exists.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably a bit old for us, but it's still probably a bit of a novelty for the UK folks. But it made me think, though, because, Jacinda Ardern, it was about 5 years ago that all wrapped up, or a little less, 3? It feels like 10 years ago now because she's been out of the country. Yeah. Lord of the Rings feels like 10 years ago, but it was more like 20, right?
Well, it's 25, I think. There are articles going out at the moment about 25 years since Fellowship of the Ring. There was a good one on the ABC today, I saw.
Was that the last one?
No, the Fellowship of the Ring, that was the first one.
Oh, okay.
I think it's 25 years since Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay.
Made it into cinemas.
But to me, they feel like almost the same thing, like the past, Jacinda Ardern, Lord of the Rings, when in fact they're 15 years. Maybe it's just part of getting older, I don't know.
They're definitely both in the past.
Yes.
My mum was in Lord of the Rings as an extra. Yeah, and she didn't have to audition either. Someone came around. I thought that this was just how they did it. Apparently, casting directors were just wandering around town, tapping people on the shoulder and saying, "Do you want to be in Lord of the Rings?"
Did they have to look like hobbits?
Yeah, I think they. Well, my mum was a Rohan refugee, to be fair, not a hobbit.
I don't know what that means. I've never read those books. My favourite bit of commentary on all of this was they used to have a thing, I think it was called Column 8. I think it was the Sydney Morning Herald. But someone, where the readers could write in their own little commentaries, and someone wrote and said, why is New Zealand so proud of this Lord of the Rings movie? It makes the place look weird, filled with strange, deformed people. Grimy, mossy, dark, people with 3 hairy toes. Makes the country look look like some terror. And then some New Zealander living in Australia wrote in a rebuttal the next week and said, but the rest of the world thinks Mad Max was a documentary about Australia. So, which would you rather?
Jacinda Ardern, of course, had something to promote, like many people on Graham Norton, which is her biopic.
Yep, the Prime Minister. So that's going out in the UK and Ireland about now. It's also on HBO in the US. But on that show, the other thing was like, I don't watch Graham Norton a lot, but I sort of see bits of it. Just feels like it's on apparently 33 seasons of it. This is the 33rd season. But the guy Alan Carr was on the couch with them, and I think he's in every clip of Graham Norton ever. So I used a bit of the AI to say how many times has he been on this? He's told boring anecdotes about Adele's wedding. February 2025, Carr shared a funny story about needing the toilet while filming a kayaking segment on a travel show with Amanda Holden. That guy's in every kind of clip show, panel show that British television seems to put it, and Graham Norton just on too much. Anyhow, so that's I guess how that whole publicity economy works. But what was also interesting, seeing it going out in the UK, the reviews in the British press were polarised, left and right, like the papers. So the left-wing Guardian gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Said it was a portrait of a full human being in charge for once. The Telegraph, right-wing paper, an airbrush documentary that was a shameless act of self-promotion. The footage feels like a political documentary and more like stumbling across someone's unguarded home videos and then realising with horror that they want you to watch them all. Oh, really? 2 stars out of 5. Financial Times, a bit more neutral, saying it a bit like a glossy production, like a retrospective campaign ad, but it did have real candour in it. They say it can be read as a record of a glorious achievement or as seems inevitable with the careers of principled, optimistic statespeople, a tale of tragic failure. So they're having a bob each way and giving it 3 stars out of 5. So that's how it went down over there. Yeah.
Another Prime Minister on screen, former UK PM Liz Truss, who lost, of course, to the lettuce and had some really heavy reviews for her show.
Yep. So she's back with what she calls the Liz Truss Show, subtitle The Home of the Counter-Revolution. Episode 1 debuted. She was supposed to put it out at 6 p.m. Told all her followers to stand by. It was an hour late. But anyway, it went live, YouTube, 7 p.m. last Friday UK time. And the episode was called London Has Fallen. And it was a bit less dignified.
The deep state and their allies in the media and politics tried to destroy me because I challenged their decades-long failure. Now I'm back. I will expose the people who brought me down. I will take on the deep state. I will tell the truth about what is happening in our country and across the West.
Gee, that's quite dramatic sounding, isn't it? Did you watch it?
I did, yeah. Like the soundtrack, by the plucked strings and the
It's
cello.
very Succession, isn't it? Yeah.
It was a bit like that. But no, she said I would tell you why all this happened to me, and the deep state interfered and woke elites pushed me out, and it wasn't me crashing the UK economy in my 44 days in charge or however long it was. I'm still no wiser, having sat through the whole thing about what the deep state elements were that pushed her out. Guardian called it, gave it 1 star, hapless ravings from a cupboard, they called it, on the internet. Independent said if there's any justice in the world, we'd be allowed to just quietly put the Truss era of 49 days in 2022 into the memory hole and leave them there. But she's back with what they call the worst show to hit YouTube in 20 years, which I kind of doubt. But they're basically saying their basic point was she's only doing this because she's trying to attract a kind of MAGA audience, and she's toured America, gone to CPAC conferences as well, and been kind of ridiculed by the British press because she doesn't seem to have cut through because people aren't that well aware of who she is. So they think, the British critics, that's what this is about, her trying to kind of ingratiate herself into America. But what she did say at the end of this was that she actually wants to do this because she wants to have a rallying point and a show for people who want to take part in politics and public life in Britain because of what she sees as kind of woke elites that are exclusionary. They've kind of been shut out and they want to restore lost value. So she says that's actually the higher mission that she's got. But yeah, the critics just think she's trying to, attach herself to elements of Trumpism in the States.
Having watched the show, do you think that she will appeal to that target audience?
No, I doubt it very much because you'd have to have the same sort of preoccupations, and so much of it was about her. Why I was so unfairly dealt to. And probably, they've got trouble in Britain. I don't think they're probably worried about what happened to her during that short premiership. But one of the reviews intriguingly said, she's so forgettable, people have forgotten about her. And it said she was once, after she was prominent, turned up at the Goodwood Racing Festival, which is a big deal, televised nationwide, and that the ITV national racing crew actually didn't know who she was. And I assumed that was kind of a joke. But then I actually found it on YouTube.
In a few minutes' time, 2 of those trainers could be very worried if the other wins. Good luck.
I don't think so. They'll all be happy.
Thank you, Doctor. It's trust, wasn't it? It was. My eyes are not deceiving me. This market could crash any minute, couldn't it?
Wow.
That was quite, you have to kind of see it because they were talking to the guy next to her. And she was standing there just like a muffet that's not speaking, just kind of the mouth open, and just like she was so overjoyed to have a camera pointed at her, and then she thought she was going to be asked something. And then they moved on because they literally didn't know. It was the guy in the studio who said, wasn't that the former Prime Minister? And by that time, the camera was focusing on an odds board at the racing side, which looks like a market. Market's like a FTSE 500 index.
Actually.
And the guy said, does that mean this market's going to crash? That was actually pretty funny.
It's very quick. Very quick. All right, we've got about 2.5 minutes left, Colin. So should we talk about this Netflix deal? Will they, won't they? Netflix apparently offering about $80 billion US, 160 odd billion New Zealand dollars for Warner Brothers Discovery. But that might not happen.
Yeah, the numbers have gone up and down. No, maybe not. Even as it was announced, there was people saying, well, the market dominance they might have both in streaming and also over the movie business, and now because they're so interlinked, that's almost the same deal. So I don't know how you would disentangle the sort of antitrust or competitive elements of that. But also, in fact, Glenn Kine, the former Warner Brothers Discovery chief executive of this part of the world, was on Wallace's panel saying he thought it was going to be Paramount. In fact, Paramount made the first offer, and Paramount these days is under the chairmanship of Larry Ellison's son, David, with this company, Skydance. It's another of the huge deals that have been done in the recent past, and they've come in with this hostile takeover offer. So it may not be Netflix, but either way, there's going to be one gigantic, titanic media company out there, but probably Paramount will be a different competitive mix to Netflix, because that combination of dominating streaming and having the input of studio movies, Tom Cruise, etc., that would be huge.
I guess this would have been a huge story for New Zealand if Warner Brothers Discovery still owned 3, but it doesn't.
Yeah, so. but it is for Sky, which now owns 3. But yeah, the Sky premium content, the Neon channel, all of that, and also what Sky puts on the free-to-air channels as replays. They've put Succession, when it wasn't a hot property, like a couple of years after it first screened, and The White Lotus and all that stuff to bulk up the Sky Open channel, previously Prime. So yeah, it will have an impact on us. And another deal, Sky in the UK might buy ITV, the British commercial broadcaster, and they do ITN, which is the television network who does the foreign coverage that you see on 3 News buy stuff here. So if that changed hands, Sky News, which is also a credible news service, will be doing their international news, and ITN, a source that New Zealanders have seen on their 6 p.m. news for a long time, that would probably just vanish.
10 seconds left, Colin. A couple of bouquets. The Spin-Off had a nice piece about Chemist Warehouse.
Yep, taking over the country, almost literally. That was a very good one because that's something that's kind of happened by stealth. And New Zealand Geographic have got its 10,000 subscribers, so they say they can carry on.
Long may it live. Colin Peacock, thank you very much.